Welcome to The Check-In, a podcast by Telos, where we explore the headlines from Israel-Palestine and across the world, wading into the complexity of seemingly intractable conflict to discover the power of peacemaking to heal us, our community, and our world. This is your host, David Katabat, checking in from North Carolina today. We're continuing our conversations with friends on the ground now that we've passed the 1-year mark since October 7th, 2023. Today, we hear from peacemaker, internationally renowned speaker, and mother Robi Damelin. Robi is a force for peace in this world. For several decades now, she has been championing a message of reconciliation and justice in the joint Palestinian and Israeli community of bereaved families called the Parents Circle Families Forum. She travels the world sharing her story of loss after her son David was killed by a Palestinian sniper in the early 2000s. But she shares it with the radical courage of a mother who's chosen reconciliation over revenge, forgiveness over contempt, just peace over never-ending war. And she shares that story alongside her Palestinian partners, mothers and fathers like Bassam Aramin, whom Robi mentions in this show, who have also lost children, and who are also working tirelessly so that no more parents have to share this pain that they have, whether Palestinian or Israeli. Robi shares with us what she's been up to in this past year with the Parent Circle, how we can support their work, and some of the places she's finding inspiration and hope. But she doesn't shy away from the difficulty and despair of this moment, when the grief is so profound. And even during the show, she received an alert about rockets heading toward her community, the source of which remained unknown at the time of recording. From what we know, she's safe, but it was such a potent reminder of the ever-present danger facing our friends right now. For all of the ways our participation extends these realities and puts all of our friends in danger, whether that's our national policies, the stories we tell of the so-called other, our silence in our communities whom we know need to hear Robi's message or be invited into a vision of mutual flourishing. This conversation reminds us we must own our responsibility, but we must also own our agency to enable our friends to flourish in the dignity, security, and freedom that they so deserve, and make the most of the opportunities before us. It's an important conversation with such a dear friend. We know you'll leave it inspired and challenged, as Robi somehow always manages to do whenever she speaks. She's a gift to us. We hope you enjoy the show. Robi, thank you so much for joining us. Where are you checking in from today?
At last, I'm in Jaffa in my house. I've been running around the world basically since the 7th of October. I had a similar reaction to the 7th of October as I had when David was killed, my son. It was like I have to change the world overnight. And so I was looking for something to do because of the polarization, because now everybody's become a great expert on the Middle East, or taking sides, or importing our conflict, and in general being part of the problem, not the solution. So we were getting hundreds and hundreds of people asking us, that is the Parent Circle, to come and do dialogue meetings to bring some form of hope. I mean, if the World Bank has to invite me because the Jewish staff are not talking to the Muslim staff and vice versa, I find that pretty pathetic. But actually, it was very opportune because we went to Washington, and at the same time, we did workshops at the World Bank, and I'm really pleased we went. It was important. And then we went to Georgetown University, and Georgetown University have been our mentors for many, many years. Originally, they invited 12 of us to come to Georgetown to train the trainer. And that was a really good start, and they helped us write our first proposals. And we've had a wonderful relationship with him ever since. And so we had dinner with the president, and I'll tell you a little aside. I was there with Muhammad Abu Jafar from our group. He was my Palestinian partner for this trip, and he's a nurse, and he lives in Jenin. And of course, if you are aware with what's happening, Jenin is not a very pleasant place to be in. In fact, we'll talk about the West Bank because I think it's very important.
Yes.
And so we had dinner with Jack DeJoya, the president, and I suddenly looked at Muhammad and I said, you know, you should come and study here. And Jack DeJoya said, I can make that happen. And Muhammad is now at Georgetown University for the next year on a full
Wow.
scholarship and working. You never know, you know, me, I open my mouth and I never know what's going to happen next. And so we also asked Georgetown if we could have some form of online education program so that we could deal with the people that were turning to us, churches, synagogues, community centers. Or you can't imagine huge federations. And so, of course, Georgetown immediately said yes. And we created a program. It's called Listening from the Heart.
Mm.
This program is online, and it's 3 dialogue meetings. It's as if we were there in the room, like a Palestinian and an Israeli, with question and answers and a manual that Georgetown helped us prepare. So that's all ready. And then we met the Federation of Teachers, and we had a wonderful meeting with them. And they invited us to Texas. I never believed I'd ever go to Texas, but there you are. They had a convention in Texas. I ate a lot of steak, and it was amazing because there were thousands and thousands of teachers. It's their annual convention and they endorsed the program, which is wonderful because it means it can go to public schools and universities. We will charge, of course, to private universities and private companies so that we can make more testimonials to make this program bigger and bigger.
Mm.
That's very exciting. And then I met the president of NYU. She was in Israel, and Bassam and I did a Zoom meeting with her. I in person and Bassam on Zoom because of the closure. And she fell in love with the whole idea of this dialogue meetings and invited us to NYU.
Oh, wow.
So I was at NYU about 3 weeks ago, where we did a dialogue meeting with the students. And by the way, we also did a dialogue meeting with the students at Georgetown. And the thing that I had to say to them is that this is the first time that Palestine has been on the map for so many years. What if you decided that you would support all the organizations, choose one organization that you can identify with, like Women Wage Peace or Breaking the Silence or Combatants for Peace or our organization or the Palestinian NGOs working to end the violence and the war? Wouldn't that be an amazing way to use all this energy which you've created on the campuses? And so we said that in Georgetown. And I also asked the kids in Georgetown, just by the way, some Jewish student that happens to be studying accountancy or law or medicine at Georgetown, what on earth has he got to do with the decisions of Netanyahu and his band of hope and glory? So, you know, it's like this excuse for anti-Semitism and Islamophobia has to be handled because
Mhm.
it's frightening. I have a young cousin who lives in London. You know, this isn't only in America. This is all over the world. And she's 13. And she wears a Star of David, but she wears it in her shirt. And that already tells you something. So she's on the plane and it comes out of her shirt. And some guy comes up to her and says, "Die, you bloody Jew." So
Wow.
we have to handle all of this stuff. It's becoming like the 30s, you know, the
Mm.
behavior that's going on. In any event, I'm very excited about this whole program because I think it can make a difference. And they're very interested to have it in Italy. and in Germany at the moment. And so it's starting to grow. And, I think the only way that I personally can handle this terrible situation is just to work as hard as I possibly can, because I can't sit at home and watch the news. It's so depressing.
Mm,
And this whole new front well, it's not so new, with Lebanon
right.
is terrifying. It's
Right.
terrifying. Last night, I don't even know what you call these weapons that they use now. I don't know what you call them in English, but I can.
Yeah.
It came and blew up the canteen where 4 soldiers were killed, and then Israel goes into Lebanon, and it's just endless. This cycle of violence. We have to stop. Just stop and look and see what we can possibly do. So,
Mm,
of course, the parent circle is not a government. We're not aligned to any political party. We just have to do whatever we can to stop this madness. And if we're talking already we were talking about the West Bank, and
hmm
it's very essential that people will understand that that is a cauldron ready to blow up. And the fact that there's been a closure for nearly a year has affected the economy. It's drastic, because
Yes.
so many men work in Israel and have not been able to come to Israel to work. And so the situation is very dire. And of course, that creates physical violence and domestic violence. And the children aren't going to school regularly. And if we're talking about that, then we must look also at the people who are out of their homes in Israel. Some 60,000 people have also not been at home for
hmm
nearly, and of course, the same situation is created. How on earth we are ever going to clean up all this mess of people whose houses, the rockets are constantly blowing up people's houses. Thank God they're not there. But nevertheless, the government is going to have to find a way to compensate, and I don't know how they will. And it's not only about compensating money-wise, but there's so much trauma that I don't know how this will be handled. So we just have to go on and do what we can to alleviate the pain. Extraordinary people have joined the parent circle since
Mm.
the 6th of October. People like Vivian Silver's son, Jonathan Zeigen. I went with him. He was with me when we went to NYU, and we spent several days in New York. And I was so proud to stand at his side. This is a guy whose mother was burned to death. His mother was a wonderful peacemaker. She used to travel and drive kids from Gaza to Tel Aviv and all over to hospitals and back again. And she started Women Wage Peace. And she was such a model of peacemaking. And she was burned to death. And the sad part is that Jonathan was speaking to her on the phone. Can you imagine, as this was all happening?
And this was on October 7th.
Yes. And then we have another family called Inon, who there's a sweet story about that too. Um, it's a whole family, 2 men and 2 brothers and 2 sisters, whose parents were also burnt to death on the 7th of October. The mother was an artist, and the fire destroyed her the house, but it stopped at the stairs of her studio. And the mother used to collect stones from all over the world, where she made like a spiral, a mandala. And we had a meeting of our women's group, and these 2 sisters who have joined the parent circle, Mayan and Mo, brought 40 stones to the women's meeting. And we marked all the stones with words of peace. And it was such an extraordinary day. And how can you not have hope when there are these kind of people also coming out of this? And the members in the West Bank, who have lost hundreds of family members in Gaza, are still staying. Out of 700 families, only 3 families have left the parent circle, which I think is a mini miracle, because there's every reason to be angry now and not to even talk about peace. I mean, people look at me as though I'm some weird character. How can I even think about peace at this point? But of course, it's more important than ever.
Yeah, I would love to hear more. I mean, you are doing so much work, Robbie, over the past year. I mean, truly, I can't keep up with your schedule and your speaking engagements and the work
I
you're
can't
doing. I know
either.
it's truly amazing. And coming from a team, we're always on the road, but you have us beat at the parent circle. Um, but you in the past year have embodied what we talk about when we talk about hope, which is that we say hope is what you do, and that you are out there working day in and day out, sharing your story, painful story, standing on the stage with partners, who the world might otherwise see as your enemy, right? But declaring a vision beyond our binary zero sum games into one of reconciliation and true justice and true peace for all people in the region. So just want to thank you for that and acknowledge all of the work you've put in. I am
Oh,
curious
it's
to
not
hear.
only me. We have a whole group of people. I'm just one person out of 700 families. And, you know, I don't know if we still have time for this, but I'd like to tell you about the summer camp and the children who go to the summer camp every year. So last year we had a wonderful summer camp, and my grandchildren went, and they all always go to the summer camp. And my grandson, who's quite spoiled, I must say, said, this is the best week I've ever spent. And I really wanted to understand why. And understanding why is a big equation in understanding how people can do things, And I thought to myself, the why here is because he met Palestinian kids, and that has alleviated all the fear of the other. And that's the goal in what we do with all these meetings that happen. And these same kids went to the UN on the 21st of September last year and signed a huge charter against violence and for reconciliation. And we had this ceremony. And then 3 weeks later came the war. Now, kids from 14 to 17 are not very nuanced. And so they became very, very angry with each other and sent terrible messages over TikTok and Instagram and all these terrible social media platforms, which, if I was king of the world, would eradicate immediately. And it was very unpleasant, and we had to have uninational meetings because they didn't want to talk to each other. And this went on for a couple of months, where everybody had to vent their anger and their pain and the stories. And then they said, okay, they'll meet on Zoom, which was not very good. And the next time we played the put yourself in the shoes of the other game, and that sort of broke the ice. So they said, okay, they're ready to meet, but we couldn't meet because there's this closure. So we had to take the whole summer camp to Cyprus. It was very important for us to have these kids heal because they're the future, And so we took them to Cyprus, and it was an extraordinarily successful summer camp. There's so many things to say about this whole situation. The understanding why, for me, is a very important factor. When I look at a kid growing up in Gaza, can you imagine what it must be like? Like you're 14, every 2 years there's a war, you haven't got a shelter, you watch your mother run away with your siblings, and there's no safety and there's no freedom of movement, and you have no hope. So what kind of adult are you going to grow up to be, and what will you be capable of doing? And then you have the kids that live on the kibbutzim. They thought they were invincible. They had lots of rockets, but they had shelters, and life was very beautiful on those kibbutzim. And the 7th of October put an end to that. And, I went to see the kibbutz near Oz, And I couldn't sleep for days after that. It is so horrifying. Just the smell was so terrible. And then I think about the kids that live in the towns surrounding Gaza, like Sderot, Ashkelon, Ashdod, all of these towns. These kids have been exposed to rockets since they were babies, more or less. And so every day, more and more rockets. And eventually, like this creates trauma. And these kids wet their beds at the age of 12. So what kind of adults are all these people going to grow up to be? We have this important role now in the parent circle is to work with these families, because I remember when David was killed, the ones who brought me the most solace were other bereaved mothers. And this is a big part of the work that we're doing now. It's endless. I can't even begin to tell you how much there still is to do. But one of the wonderful things is the new people who are coming up. Maybe I can go and live in the Caribbean now and retire.
You deserve a blessed retirement for sure, Robbie. I'm curious to hear more. I mean, you shared a little bit about how in the past year you've had, new members very tragically, but also providing you a source of hope and inspiration. How else has the parent circle been received over the past year within Israeli and also Palestinian society? What challenges are you facing? What kinds of successes or places of inspiration otherwise are you seeing?
Well, I can't, I think now people forget that the war's ongoing. So there's so much anger. Look, I was caught at the airport the other night in Tel Aviv when the Iranians shot those bombs. You imagine what that's like in the airport. I mean, that's a wonderful target. So we all went into the shelter, and I looked around and I thought, where's the end of this madness? And so it's too soon. The Israelis are very angry, and so are the Palestinians. And so they look at us like we're quite strange. Some wonderful American animators created a small clip for us, which is we're using all over. And after publishing it on Facebook and all of these platforms, we got such cruel talkbacks from so many people saying you're mad, you're naive, what do you think, how will we have peace, all these kind of things. But it's to be expected. There's no instant reconciliation. This is going to take a very long time, but we can't give up.
That's such a powerful word. We need to hear it. The work you're doing is not naive at all. In fact, it's naive to think that we can keep playing this game of traumatizing our youth, killing each other, and somehow end up in peace, right? And what you're saying is that this is madness. This is making no one safe, no one more dignified, no one more free. What we need is a total reimagination of what it means to live alongside of each other, with each other. And so the parent circle, the work you're doing embodies that and helps us taste and see what this vision could look like. The last question I'd have for you, Robbie, is what are you asking of Americans right now? Our, listeners, our network, most of us come from the States. We have access to our elected officials who play such a huge role in this. The stories we tell, the policies we enact. What would you have us do? What would you say to Americans right now when we think about what our options and opportunities are to support peace?
This is so weird. As I'm talking to you, I get a notice, rocket sirens activated in Tel Aviv, across central. It's just insane. But you will have, if it's my area, then I get like a red alert. So you're asking me a question. I can't even remember what you asked me. Sorry, can you ask me
No,
again?
please, and please do what you need to keep yourself safe, of course.
No, I'm in my safe room with my cat. That's all
Okay.
that.
Well, I'm glad you're there and I'm glad you're safe. And what a witness to the realities right now that many of us don't realize. My question is, what would you say to Americans right now about what opportunities they have or what they need to know or what they need to do in relation to your life and your community to support peace and flourishing for all?
Well, I think I said it right in the beginning. This not importing our conflict and supporting groups on the ground that are working to end this madness. Oh, shit. That's just hang on. I have to close the door, okay? And the windows. Okay. Now you understand. It's insane.
I'm so sorry. Gosh.
It says Tel Aviv, South, and Jaffa.
Oh, Lord.
Uh-huh. I just looked out of the window, saw these kids running. That's what it's like to live here. But it's also think about those who have no shelters.
Mm.
And there are many Palestinians who don't. And these missiles are not marked. You know, they fall in the West Bank as well. They killed a Palestinian the other day. So what is this? What is this doing? How can I say I'm not going to continue to work?
Robi, it's hard to know. It's hard to know what to say when we see our friends like you in danger. And part of it is because we have not spoken loud enough for an end to this madness.
I really think what I would be very happy if all the people who are on this, listen to this podcast, would open the listening from the heart. If you could put up how they can get into that, the American Friends of the Parent Circle, and they could perhaps interest their universities if they know them, or schools, or people, communities who would be interested to listen. Maybe Telos can do a lesson on one day of the whole listening from the heart and use one of the dialogue meetings. There's a beautiful dialogue meeting with Bassam and Ilana Kaminka, who lost her son. She also joined the Parent Circle on the 7th of October. It's one of the 3 videos.
We would be delighted to share that, Robi. I mean, the invitation that you all give us to truly listen to understand, which we say is our first practice of peacemaking, is so essential. And you all at the Parent Circle model that in everything that you do. So we'd be really excited to share that content with our network. Folks, you need to check out the work the Parent Circle is doing. You need to follow their work on social media. You can go back and even listen to Robi's story more fully in our first 2 episodes ever of this podcast. Robi was there from the very beginning. So we thank you. And her story will challenge you, will inspire you. And we need your witness in the world, Robi. You and everyone at the Parent Circle. You're doing such important, powerful work. And we have you in our thoughts and prayers. We hope you stay safe. And we take responsibility for the work that we have before us to participate in your security and your dignity and your freedom, and on behalf of all people in the region. So I'm sitting with the reality that you are in your safe room now as rockets are going. I'm grieved, so grieved. I'm angry with that reality. And I know this is normal life in some way for you, even though it should not be normal, right? At all. And so I'm challenging myself. I'm challenging all of us who are listening. We have work to do on behalf of all of our friends, including Robi. So thank you for joining us.
So much, thank you. And maybe we'll meet up on the 21st of November. We'll be in Washington for the Washington Post conference, and we might be, maybe you can do some work when we're there.
I would love that, Robi. And if nothing else, then at least I can buy you a drink and give you some chance. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
It's a day. Thanks, Robi, so much. And thanks for listening, everybody. Again, we'll share in the show notes more links and content from the Parent Circle Families Forum, as well as a link to our earlier episodes with Robi. If you are enjoying the show, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps us out. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next time.